Good morning. My name is Matlynn Yoeman, and you are sitting in the Clerk of Session training for 2022, which is being brought to you by the East Community Steering Team of the Presbytery. We've got guests today from the West community for our training, and so you'll see some names you don't recognize, but what I sent you guys an email last night that had the PowerPoint presentation, as well as the Clerk of Session records review checklist. So if you print out that checklist, or just make sure you have access to it on your computer, because we'll need that as we go through the presentation today. So now what I'm going to do is let's have everybody introduce yourselves so we all know who's here, because you all are the best resources for each other. If you have questions or whatever, after this is over with, your next door neighbor churches are always willing to help you. If not, also myself and Jay Bender or Catherine Brandy, and we'll talk about who she is in a little bit. But if you would, let me tell you who I am first. As I said before, my name is Matlynn Yoeman. I am an elder at Chestnut Street Presbyterian Church. I served at Clerk at my church for 12 years. I served on the East Community Steering Team when it first started. And somehow I got the job of being responsible for the sessional records review. And I recently just came off of COM, and I've done some other things in the Presbytery. But somehow I've gotten this job and I've done it several times. So I may be boring to some of the people who have sat through it before. But hopefully those of you who haven't will get something out of today's presentation. All right, we've covered our welcome and introduction.
I'm sorry, I thought I had hung up.
Okay, if everybody will mute your computers there.
On now. I've tried a number of times, finally got on.
Okay, Terry,
Yes.
tell us your name and what church you're from.
Terry Pickett. I am from Woodburn Presbyterian Church in Leland.
Okay, welcome today. How long have you been a clerk?
About 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
Very new.
All right, we're going to try to help you today. All right, so if everybody would mute, can everybody see the screen? Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
All right, then we're going to go ahead and get started. Why do we have a clerk of session? In our book of order, is everybody familiar with well, I'm not going to ask the question here. We'll get to it. But the book of order, which is part of the Constitution of the Presbyterian Church USA, there's a requirement that each council of the church shall keep a full and accurate record of its proceedings, and those minutes that clerk takes becomes property of the church, and you keep them forever. So that is one of the duties that the clerk does, is to maintain the minutes of what happens in your session meetings. And who can be the clerk? The clerk of session will be a ruling elder who is elected by the session for a specific term of time. Now, somebody said they had been a clerk for 40 years. I'm sure that's multiple terms, but the term, as I always say in these sessions, in these meetings, it's not life. You have a specific period of time that you are to serve as a clerk, and that should be included in the bylaws of your session. So let's talk about what the duties of the clerk are, and the book of order specifies those. The first one, as we just mentioned, is to record the transactions of the session. They take the minutes at the session meeting. Second one is to keep or maintain the rolls of membership and attendance, and to maintain any required registers, which are typically marriage, baptism, your terms of your pastors, your officers and their terms. It's to preserve the records of the session, and in some very unique situations to furnish parts of your minutes to hire councils of the church. Presbytery may request, or the Senate, or the General Assembly, but that's rare. That's an exception. So let's go through and talk about each one of those requirements. The first one is to record the transactions of the council. You want to keep a full and accurate record of what session has done. And you're also going to be the secretary for all the meetings of the congregation. Remember, the minutes that you take are basically the historical record of what goes on in church. So it shouldn't, anybody that picks those up should be able to read them and have a good idea, you know, this is what's going on in this church. So those of you who are new clerks, let's talk about what things need to be included in the minutes. Your minutes should state the name of the church, where it's located, the date and time of the meeting, whether the meeting is a stated meeting, a regular, like you meet monthly or quarterly or whatever it is, it's a regular scheduled meeting, or if it is a called meeting. And called meetings are meetings that you call for a specific purpose. It may be a meeting to discuss the terms of call of the pastor. That's the only thing you discuss at that particular meeting, but you need to state whether it's a stated meeting or a called meeting. All your meetings need to be called to order by the moderator, and they should open with a prayer and a devotion. That's the devotion part's option, but at least open with prayer. You need to record the attendance, who is present, who's absent, who's excused. That should be shown in your minutes. The clerk will need to declare that a quorum is present. Your bylaw tells you how many people have to be present in order to conduct business, and that needs to state that a quorum is present. You would need to approve the minutes of your previous meeting. You also need to show that you've approved the agenda for the meeting. If you have committees should make reports, those should be included in your minutes. You'll have new business and what actions were taken in the new business. Any old business that's unfinished, you'll have that listed in the minutes and what actions were taken. And then any other announcements or items when your next meeting is going to be, and you will adjourn your meeting, and you will adjourn it also with prayer. So those are the items that need to be in, the minimum items that need to be in your minutes. I'm going to send the email out as soon as we finish with this, and it's going to have handouts, and I've got a handout to talk about the basic things that need to be in the minutes. The other item we talked about was keeping the rolls and membership and attendance. You know, we pay per capita in the Presbyterian Church, and per capita is based on your membership 2 years prior. So you have to have accurate rolls of your active members, your baptized members, and your affiliate members. And we'll talk about affiliate members a little bit more in detail as we go through that. But those are the three roles that are required by the Book of Order. And as I said before, you have to maintain registers in the Book of Order specific about those registers, which are registers of baptisms, which have been authorized by the session, your ruling elders, your deacons, your installed pastors with their dates of service, and any other registers as the session may deem necessary. Duty that you have is to preserve the records. Remember, when you are taking minutes, maintaining rolls, maintaining registers, that's the church history. And it's the responsibility of the clerk to make sure those records are maintained in a climate controlled space, that they are bound, pages are numbered, and that's one of your major jobs, because that is the history. My church is 100, let's see, from 1886. So we have records that go back. We actually have the first minute book, and I'll talk to you about how we've gone about preserving it. The Presbyterian Historical Society, which is in Philadelphia, is set up to house records, to preserve records. That's our historical arm. You can send your records to them and have them digitized. They will send you back in some form of media, whether it's a CD or if it's microfilm or whatever. I don't know what the latest thing right now, all mounted on disc. And they have climate control facilities that you can store those old books in. So that's an option for you. And I'll have some information for you on that in a little bit. And that last duty of the clerk is to furnish extracts from your records when it's required by another council of the church. There could be a situation where there's a permanent judicial commission hearing or whatever regarding a pastor, or there may be a lawsuit or whatever. They may need information from your records. So the clerk would be the person that would be asked to go back and locate the information that supports whatever claims or just refutes whatever claims that are being made regarding your church. Those duties are the ones that are specified by the clerk of session. By the book of order, excuse me, for the clerk of session. However, in any job description, there's usually that last line and other duties as assigned. And there are all kinds of things that clerks get stuck doing. So one of your responsibilities not only is to be familiar with the responsibilities of session, and there's the book of order reference number, and we're going to talk about the book of order a little bit in more detail so you can be familiar with that. You are to complete the annual statistical report in a timely manner, and you should have just done that or in the process of finishing that up. You get a packet from the Presbytery, usually was it October, November, somewhere in there, that has a list of items for you to complete and submit back to the Presbytery office. That includes your officer information, your pastor's continuing education reports, the elder necrology, the terms of call, your church information verification, and your certificate of insurance. And we're going to talk about insurance in a little bit because that hasn't always been an item that's been in the packet. But then you have to go online and complete the statistical part of that report, which can be fun. But hopefully you have done that. If you have not done that, talk to me after this is over with so we can kind of make sure you're taking care of that. If you're a brand new clerk, I presume the previous clerk has taken care of that. Make sure that's been done, because that is a book of order requirement that you submit that annual statistical report. You have to have your sessional records reviewed. It's not just your minutes. When I say sessional records, it's your minutes, it's your manual administrative operation, it's your rolls, your registers. They are reviewed annually, and that's going to be the bulk of this presentation today. It's what that process is all about. You and your pastor are the contact points for the Presbytery office and the Senate or the General Assembly. So you guys will get things that nobody else gets. So it's your responsibility, along with your pastor, to look at correspondence that comes in and bring it to the attention of session if that's where it needs to go, or direct it to whomever it needs to go to. Some more things that you have to do, but they're not specified in the book of order. You need to be familiar with Robert's Rules of Order and those procedures when you're having meetings. And I have a handout on a cheat sheet for Robert's Rules of Order that I'm going to include in that email that I'm going to send you. Your moderator has been trained in it, so between the two of you all, things will go smoothly at your session meetings. The reporting part piece here, it helps. Your meetings are open to the public. They're open to your members if they wish to attend. But it helps if your congregation knows what you guys do in session meetings. So any actions that you've taken in session meeting. So it'd be good if you as the clerk or whoever's designated prepare some kind of monthly report or quarterly report to let your congregation know what actions have been taken during your session meetings. And another duty is just to make sure that your pastor's terms of call are reviewed annually. And if you have commission ruling elder as your pastoral voice, you have to review their terms of call and submit their contract to your community COM, your commission on ministry, every year. And you would do that in November or December so that it can be approved by COM and everything is in place for you, for your CRE or your supply pastor or whatever pastoral relation you have other than a full-time pastor, that it is approved before the next year starts. These are the two books that are like Bibles for you as a clerk, your Book of Order and Robert's Rules of Order, because the Book of Order says that you will use the parliamentary procedures in the latest edition of Robert's Rules of Order. If you don't have a Robert's Rule of Order, I would encourage you to put your hands on one. And the Book of Order, if you have not gotten one of those, you can get those from the PCUSA store on pcusa.org. You can order a book. I like books. I like things I can hold in my hand. But there's also an electronic copy of that Book of Order that you can download from that site as well. But if you don't have one, get one. Book of Order. As I said, it's part of the Constitution of our denomination. Our Constitution is in two parts. It's the Book of Confessions, the things that we believe in, or the things that guide what we believe in, and then the Book of Order. The Book of Order is divided into 4 parts. They have sections that your page numbering, your section numbering start with one of these alphabets. F is the foundations of Presbyterian polity. If you don't know what we believe, look at section F. Section G, where you'll spend most of your time, is the form of government. It tells you how we do things, the things that we're required to do. And you see as we go through this presentation, I have references to the Book of Order. When you see those numbers, G-3.1026 or whatever, that is a section in the Book of Order that tells us what to do, why we do whatever. W is the directory for worship, and it tells you about what things are required in worship, how worship should be done, whatever. That's the W section. And the D section, which is the section we hopefully don't have to go in very often, is our rules of discipline. And that's the section where we go to when somebody's done something they shouldn't have done. So we kind of stay out of there. But the G section, again, is the section that you'll pay more attention to. In the back of the Book of Order, you have an index, and that is the most helpful way of getting around this book or getting around in this book. And you just look for the, and then it will tell you which section in the Book of Order and what's down to the actual paragraphs or whatever that you need to go to. So use your index as you're trying to navigate around the Book of Order. And again, records preservation. All right, Presbyterian Historical Society. If you go to their website and click on services, let me go back one. And then you're going to go to digitization. There's a page that it talks about what the digitization process is, how much they charge to digitize your records, and the ways they can send it back to you, and how you prepare your records for digitization. And it's no charge for them to store your records. But I wanted to point out on that same page, there's a link about grants. They offer grants to help you with the digitization process. They can cover up to $500 of the cost to digitize your records. So please consider that. It tells you on this page what the process is. You have to have less than 250 members. So this is geared towards small churches. And you have to be at least 50 years old. Your church has to be at least 50 years old. So think about that in terms of storing your records. We live in southeastern North Carolina. We have hurricanes. We have humidity. We have all kinds of things that don't help in terms of preserving records. I think in the past, we've had people have sent some things to Montreat, but everything has been consolidated at the Historical Society.
It's just been going on
in Philadelphia. Consider that as an option for you to have your records preserved. All right, now let's talk about the records. Your records should be maintained in a bound book. Hopefully everybody has some kind of a notebook like this. You're not keeping your records in a plastic binder. Plastic over time is made of chemicals. Chemicals will leach into your papers and your paper can be damaged. You're to keep your minutes on acid-free paper and keep them in some binder like this. You can get this binder from Cokesbury. I think people have mentioned they've been able to get it on Amazon or some other places, Staples, Office Depot. I know if you're taking your minutes, you're writing them out, you're typing them up, but you make sure you print them on the acid-free paper and they are signed on the paper, not a digital signature, but signed on the paper, because you need original signatures on your minutes. Your pages need to be numbered. And if you have blank pages, it's helpful if you have a stamp or something that says intentionally left blank on those blank pages, or you put an X through the page or whatever. But we didn't, and the reason for that is to prevent somebody from going in and altering your minutes and adding things and whatever that you did not intend to have in your minutes. Talking about page numbering, you can do one of three options. Two I recommend, one I don't. You can just, if you just start from day one with page one and just keep going consecutively, there's one option. A second option is to number your pages based on the years. So like we just started January of 2023. So you could have 23-01 be the first page of the January minutes and go from there for that year. So you're numbering by year. You can also buy pre-numbered pages. I don't recommend the pre-numbered pages simply because we're all human, we make mistakes. And if you have, paper jams in the printer or whatever, or after you print it, like, oops, that shouldn't be like that. And then so you'll have gaps in your numbering. So it's better if you get the blank pages that you can number as opposed to the pre-numbered pages. That's just my preference. All right, let's talk about incorporation for a minute. There was a movement afoot many, many years ago that all churches become incorporated. So I will assume that all our churches are incorporated. And if you would like, my church was, when we started going back and looking at incorporation papers many years ago, we realized that some of the people that are listed on the incorporation papers are no longer with us. It could be a case where you have a registered agent. That's the contact person for the Secretary of State's office. That person may no longer be with you. So check your incorporation papers. Go on the Secretary of State of North Carolina's website and look up your church. See who the registered agent is and make sure that that person is still with us. And if they're not, in this email I'm sending you the form to change the registered agent. If your street has been renamed or whatever, you need to change the address. Or if your church is moved, you need to change the address with the Secretary of State. So fill that form out, send them $5, and they will update your information with in their records. Now, your incorporation as a corporation, your corporation needs to meet once a year. Typically, churches, when they have their annual congregation meeting, they will have the corporation meet as part of that. The offices of your corporation need to be designated in your bylaws. And it could be your elders. You may have trustees. I don't know who, but your bylaws should state who are the officers of the corporation. And really the business that the corporation would address would be, say, for example, purchasing property, selling property, things like that. They would, that would be taken care of during the meeting of the corporation. But typically when your corporations meet, you don't have anything that they're supposed to do to handle. So the corporation meets, no business to address. You go back to your congregation meeting, finish that, and you're done. You have met the requirement. Back in 2011, 2013 Book of Order, General Assembly began the requirement of having an administrative manual. Your administrative manual basically is a collection of all those policies and procedures that every church has. Your bylaws, it's basically the book. So if something happened to the person who's basically been in charge or who knows why everything happens in the church, if something happens, then they can pick that book up and keep going. You're not sitting there and say, oh, who can sign the checking account? Oh, what do we do if somebody wants to rent the building? All those things are in your administrative manual. So from 2011, 2013, 2014, everybody should have one in place. And that becomes a part of the sessional records for your church. And it's reviewed when we have a sessional records review. So go and find your administrative manual if you're a new clerk and get familiar with that. In the handouts that I'm going to send you an administrative, at least a list of things that should be in the administrative manual. And so that you can look at that and see if your administrative manual covers the things that should be in the administrative manual. One thing or two things that are required to be in that manual are a sexual misconduct policy and a child and youth protection policy. That's required by the Book of Order. There is a sample in the email I'm sending you of a sexual misconduct policy and a child youth protection, a youth and vulnerable adult protection policy as well. Questions? I've covered a lot in a hurry.
I have a question.
Okay.
When you take minutes, do you just record action items or do you record discussion as well?
The main thing that you need to make sure you get is action items. I mean, some people do very detailed minutes and put everything that's being said in the meeting basically in the minutes. And some people do action items. You want to give the things that are required. And if you think all the discussion will enhance it, if somebody, like I'm just coming into your church and looking at your minutes and I'm trying to see what's going on. If you think all the discussion will help, put it there. If not, I personally don't put all the discussion when I do minutes, but I do enough that I think person get a good picture. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you.
It's a judgment call on, it's just a judgment call on your part.
Is there any protocol for anyone, any member who would like to read the minutes book?
Your book's open.
Well, that's been our policy. Is that just standard?
Yeah, your books are open.
Okay, that's
Your
just everybody.
your minutes, your treasury reports, all those things are open to your members.
And that's open to all. There really is no protocol.
Right.
Gotcha.
They just need to make a request and set up a time that's convenient so y'all can sit down and I think I would sit there with the person so if they have questions, you can answer the questions.
Okay.
Madeline,
Yes.
can you share what piqued my curiosity was talking about the monthly report to the congregation?
Mhm.
Can you share a little bit more information about that?
Well, what I'm thinking about, because sometimes people say, "Oh, Sessions doing this." I don't know what they're doing over there. They're they're having those meetings and whatever. You could put something in your bulletin as minor as saying session approved, da da da. The session voted to do da da da. Just some bullet points of what the session has done. You can post something up in the area in the church where a lot of foot traffic goes through. People can just look at it and see this is what session has done.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Matlynn, I don't have a question, but I would like to see something perhaps where the transition from a congregational meeting to a corporation meeting is written, how that's written out.
You would basically say that if you're going to do it as a part of the congregational meeting in the middle or whatever, that the congregational meeting is suspended and the meeting of the corporation began at whatever time or whatever. And
Okay.
then the meeting of the corporation adjourned and the congregational meeting resumed.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, so let's talk about this whole process. The Book of Order requires that each council, in this case, council is your session, the Presbytery, the Senate, whatever, because there's a review of records at every one of these levels. That each council shall review annually based on the body's meeting frequency, the proceedings and actions of all entities related to the body. Now, Presbytery of Coastal Carolina has stated that there will be an annual review of your sessional records. And this review is done in the East. Well, I don't know how things are done in the West. I can only speak to the East. But in the East community, Catherine Brandon, Catherine is on this Zoom. Catherine is a member of the East Community Steering Team, and she has that lovely privilege of coordinating the sessional records reviews. And this is her contact information. So if you have any questions after we get through with all this, you can touch bases with her. Catherine, is there anything you want to say before I go through this?
Matlynn bequeathed me this opportunity to get to know all the churches, which has been wonderful and an experience. And Nancy has sent out the meeting times. We have not heard back from everybody yet, but we will contact you if we haven't heard from you yet. Thank you, Matlynn.
Okay. But keep that name and number and email information there because you may need it. All right, so this is the sessional records review checklist. And basically what we've done in the East community, I think Catherine has 3 sessions and I've got that in this PowerPoint. We'll get to that at the end, where you all will come together. You can pick whichever session you want to attend. Prior to that, you're going to go through your minutes. And this 2-page document, you're going to go through and make sure that you have covered all these items in your sessional records. And when I keep saying sessional records, that's your minutes, your administrative manual, your rolls, your registers. So that makes up your sessional records. You want to make sure that you have done those things. And this is kind of your guide going forward. Those of you who are new clerks, as you're going through this year, make sure these things are happening in your session meeting. There's other stuff, but these are the ones that the Presbytery asked to look at to see that you are doing these things. And we're going to talk about those now. It's divided into 3 sections. The first section has to do with what session does. All right, so the first item on that checklist is each meeting open and closed with prayer. The Book of Order requires that your meetings are open and closed with prayer. Simple, plain and simple. So your minutes need to show that. The second is there a quorum present for each meeting? Again, a requirement of the Book of Order. And I'm giving you the Book of Order references underneath each one of these sections of the checklist. Your quorum is determined by your bylaws. So look at your bylaws if you're a new clerk and see what a quorum is for your session meetings. Also see what your quorum is for a congregation meeting. If you don't have a quorum present, you can't transact any business. And then the meeting becomes an informational meeting. You cannot vote on anything without a quorum. Now, someone asked me about, and I think you've heard as well about, since with COVID, we had to resort to some different ways of meeting. We couldn't do face-to-face meetings. We were doing it in Zoom meetings. We were doing things via Facebook. We were doing all kinds of things to make sure that we conducted the business of the church. I went to a Senate meeting, committee meeting this week. And one of the things that Warren Lassane, who is the exec for the Senate of the Mid-Atlantic, which you're a member of, presented was an amendment to the Book of Order. And this is the amendment that addresses the electronic meetings. And starting that third line, commissions and committees may meet electronically, provided that the technology employed allows for all members present to hear and be heard simultaneously. And this includes joining one or more persons electronically to an otherwise in-person meeting. If you've been to Presbytery meetings during the pandemic, you've heard Reverend Gerard Lowry make the point of saying that, we would need to amend our bylaws or amend our procedures or whatever to authorize these electronic meetings. So look at your bylaws and see if they speak to allowing electronic meetings for your session. You need to put those in place because we may have another pandemic or some other situation may occur. So look at your bylaws and make sure they address that. But this is a proposed amendment to the Book of Order. Item number 3 on the list, did the session hold stated meetings at least quarterly? The Book of Order requires that sessions meet at least quarterly, 4 times a year. You may meet every month or every other month or whatever, but you've got to meet at least 4 times a year. So that should be stated in your bylaws, whatever your meeting schedule is. Item number 4 is a budget prepared and adopted annually. Your session should approve a budget every year and present that budget to your congregation. So you just need to answer the question. We do or we don't. And number 5 are periodic reports of all financial transactions made to the session. All right, here's the Book of Order references regarding finances. Your treasurer should be reporting to your session monthly, quarterly, but more than once a year on the financial transactions of your church. Remember, the session has the oversight for the finances of your church. Did the session annually provide for a full financial review of all financial books and records? That is the charge to the session. Book of Order states that a full financial review will be conducted every year, either by a certified public accountant or a committee of members versed in accounting procedures. So you can pay a CPA to do it for you, or if you've got members of your finance committee or who are not involved in the process, who don't write the checks, who don't count the money, whatever, but people who may have some kind of financial background, who can sit down and look at the books and report back to session. We have reviewed the books and everything's in order.
Now you're referencing our annual audit, right?
Yes, that's the same thing as a financial review. Mm-hmm. And in the handouts I'm going to send you is the checklist that Gail Boykin, our former treasurer, sent out several years ago that gives you a good guideline of how to go through and review the financial records of the church. So I'm sending that to you.
Oh, thank you.
Now, number 7, are commissioners to Presbytery elected for each meeting or preferably for 1 year? Presbytery meets twice a year minimum, March and October. And then in the summer, in June, the communities will have community gatherings. So, but that serves as a Presbytery meeting. So your session needs to have a commissioner at each one of those meetings, those 3 meetings. The reason the Book of Order speaks to preferably for 1 year, if you've never been to Presbytery before, it can be confusing. But if you go 3 times a year, you have a good idea what's going on. So, but I know that's a stretch for some people to make that commitment to go 3 times a year to Presbytery or community gatherings. But whoever is elected, that needs to show in your minutes. And that commissioner, when they come back, the next meeting needs to make a report to the session about what happened at the Presbytery meeting. And that report needs to be notated in your minutes. Okay, item number 9. Do the minutes reflect a full and accurate record of its proceedings? Book of Order requires that. The reference is right there. And it's plainly stated. So you just want to, again, have minutes that reflect what actions the session has taken, and that anybody can pick up and look at who wasn't at that meeting and figure out what went on. So you want to write them in that type of way that anybody can look at it and understand what happened during your session meeting. Item 10A, the date of the last active membership roll review. And if actions were taken, what names were recorded in the session minutes. Now, this is a touchy subject. As I mentioned before, your per capita apportionment is based on your membership rolls from 2 years ago. If you haven't reviewed your records, your membership rolls in 5 years, 10 years, or whatever, you probably have a lot of people up there who are not attending your church, who are not actively participating in the life of the church, whether it's physically coming, financially supporting, or whatever. You are encouraged to review your membership rolls on whatever schedule you all determine. If you have people up there who, you know, well, Susie Jones has moved to Kentucky, and Susie hasn't contacted the church, hadn't done anything. Have a process in place to contact those people and find out whether or not they wish to remain on the rolls. And then after you finish that process, then you as a session will sit down and say, we're removing Tom Jones, Mary Smith, Susie Jones, whatever, from the records. So this only asks for what date did you do the review. This is a touchy subject because especially in small, well, I don't necessarily mean small churches for that matter, but it's a touchy subject in that families sometimes are very touchy when you talk about taking their family member off the roll. You want to do it in as most tactful way as possible, that folk, let the church know you're doing a membership roll review or whatever, so they know what you're doing. But you need to review your rolls.
Excuse me, Matlynn, I have a question. Do you have an example of a letter or something that you have used, or you know someone has used to send out to when you're trying to find that information on your members?
I don't have this in my stack right now. I have to look for something. I'll make a note and see if I can find you something.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
We're working on that now, and
Okay.
it is delicate.
It is a very delicate issue. Let's see. In 10B, you have registers that show your baptisms, your marriages, and you also have your registers with your officers. Just make sure that you are keeping those up to date. Now, one thing I need to, I guess, mention right here too, inactive members. The Book of Order does not require that you maintain an inactive member roll. It is not a requirement. Some churches still keep that, but it's not required that you keep that.
One more question, Matlynn. If everything has been moved from the registers to electronics with the CDM or whatever software
Mhm.
In our case, we're using the CDM software. Everything has been moved to that. So we really don't have registers. Is there any certain special way we should handle that?
You're supposed to maintain the registers.
Okay,
I would say if you've got it on electronically, I would also put it, that's just me,
okay,
in the books, like the minute books. There are registers that you can purchase as well. But you got your original rolls.
mm-hmm,
So if you have people on those rolls that you're taking off because they're deceased, or because you after you've done your due diligence and you've removed them from the roll, you need to show that when you've taken them off those rolls.
mm-hmm,
So you have to juggle it best you can.
okay.
Catherine, you got a preference on that?
I'm right there with you, Matlynn. The whole purpose is for the history of the church. And yes, it doesn't seem like it's something that you might need immediately to go back to, but as the years go by and somebody comes up with a question or a family calls from out of state to get information, you have to be able to go to it. And what I've discovered is electronic records tend to update them, and then the people from years ago disappear completely from electronic records. So there's no way to account for their ever having been a member.
I think the electronic, thank you, Catherine. I think the electronic records are convenient, but I think it would be better to record whatever's on it electronically and put it into your books as well.
Okay,
Even if it means just printing out all those electronic records you've kept every year, just, you know, to get a pinpoint in time picture of the way it looks, and then have those in those history books.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Matlynn,
Yes.
hi, this is Eileen. One thing I was going to say, how someone was asking about a letter, and we don't do letters to families or people we're trying to get information on before removing them. And it also somewhat answers an earlier discussion, but our minutes, once they are approved, a reading copy of the approved minutes is what we post monthly. So everyone gets to have access to the minutes. When we do our roll reviews and report on them and make decisions, that's one of the for the record items. And it is tricky moving people off the active list. And our per capita is, you know, we're asked to account for active members. So we find that we have kept our inactive list. They're clearly marked as inactive. And so we say, once we say the names of the people who are moved to inactive, we then say, and the resulting membership roles are so many active, so many inactive for a total membership. Because we don't consider we've ever taken them off the rolls. We've moved them to an inactive list.
So when you do your statistical report, you are not counting these people.
No, it asks for active members.
Okay, that's
And
amazing.
there's an
Because
account. Because there's another question. Yeah, I'm just now doing it this weekend. And one of the questions about in your change in membership numbers, it's sort of an other category, which says enter all other reductions, reasons including persons temporarily excluded or removed from active membership.
Okay.
So we've done it that way. It's just what we came up with that seems to be working. It can be very touchy.
Yes.
But you know, people see their names. If their family members see it, they clearly know their family member is not active.
Okay.
But they're still counted in the total membership.
All right. Number 11, does the session have a manual of administrative operations? When you come to your sessional records review, bring your manual of administrative operations, because whoever's looking at your records will look at those. Look at that document. 11A, definition of a quorum for congregational meetings. Again, your bylaws should state what the quorum is for the congregational meeting. So you should be able to point to that in your administrative manual. What is the minimum notification for congregational meetings? How's that defined? You should have it defined in the bylaws. Typically, it is 2 Sundays notice. I think a lot of people have used that 2 Sundays prior. But whatever you've defined you need to have it defined in your bylaws, in your administrative manual. Is the length of the term of office for the clerk of session defined? It needs to be defined other than life, okay? Make sure it's written in your bylaws. Is the length of term of office of your treasurer defined? That also needs to be specified in your bylaws, whatever their term is. And when you vote on the treasurer or you vote on the clerk, that needs to be shown in your minutes. Is there a procedure in place to ensure that all offerings shall be counted and recorded by at least 2 duly appointed persons or by 1 fidelity bonded person? You should have a procedure in your administrative manual that says how offerings should be counted, who deposits it, you know, whatever. That all should be outlined in your administrative manual. And are the financial books and records open at reasonable times to all persons authorized by the session? Somebody wants to look at the financial records of the church, they make a request to session and a time is set up for them. That needs to be stated somewhere what that process is to be able to look at the financial records. Are the committees of the session listed and their duties described along with who's eligible to serve, how many members are appointed, and the length of service? And the Book of Order talks about the fact that committees can be created and that information needs to be in your administrative manual. Does the session have a sexual misconduct policy and a youth, child, and vulnerable adult protection policy? Those policies need to be in your administrative manual. Has the section taken actions consistent with G 3.02 blah, 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 that will be for the good of the whole church? And there's a list of things there. And we've covered, I think, we've talked about the commissioners. Oh, now the rest of this we have not talked about. Item B, there's a nominating committee of your presbytery who is constantly looking for people to serve on presbytery committees and also to serve on Senate committees. It would be really helpful if sessions have people that are interested in serving on presbytery committees, if they let Nancy Gladden know so she can share that with, or in the West, your mission coordinator know, so that they can share that information with the nominating committee, because they have a devil of a time. I've served on that committee and it's hard trying to find people to fill committees of the presbytery or the synod. You remember I mentioned before that the clerk and the pastor are the points of contact for the presbytery or the synod or the general assembly. Item C, see that the guidance and communication of those bodies are considered and that body actions are taken and observed and carried out. So share the correspondence. If you need action, that action's been done. You would see that in your minutes, and you would see in your minutes that you have carried out those actions. Item D, you have welcomed representatives of the presbytery on occasions of their visits. So you, Nancy Gladden for East Community, who's the mission coordinator for our community, will visit your churches. Record that in your minutes. Your COM, Commission on Ministry, you have a liaison assigned to your church. They may visit. Record that in your minutes. Whoever comes as an officer or a representative of the presbytery, record that information in your minutes. Item E, propose the presbytery or through it to the Synod or General Assembly such measures as may be of common concern to the mission of the church. All right, The book of order is a living document, is a document that can be amended. And some amendments start in local churches and are brought forward, be voted on by the body at the Presbytery meeting, which meets every 2 years. So you have the opportunity, if you all feel really strongly about something, to propose an amendment or propose something that to be acted on by the General Assembly. And then item F, that statistical report that we've hit on before. Make sure that stuff is done. Now, the next section of the checklist talks about things that the congregation is to do. Did the congregation hold an annual meeting and was a quorum determined to be present? That would be in your minutes of the congregational meeting, but it's a requirement of Book of Order that you hold a meeting annually. And you need to state that in your minutes that a quorum was present, just like you do for a session meeting. Catherine, you had a question?
Not in addition to a question, I want to make one addition to that last screen that you had when you were asking the churches to be attentive to giving names of people who are willing to serve on committees. One of the other things that has come up recently is I've had to fill out a few forms on people in the congregation who are serving on Presbytery or Synod or council committees. I would like to ask that when a commissioner goes to Presbytery from your church and they bring back a report from a Presbytery meeting, within that meeting, if nominations have been held and one of your church members has been nominated and elected to a committee, put that in your session minutes. And that will make it so much easier to be able to answer those questions, because they seem to be asking a few of those in recent years more than they did before.
All right, did the congregation provide for election of a nominating committee? Again, that lovely committee that has to find the officers for your church. You have to elect that committee. It's not an appointed committee. So your minutes need to show when you elected the nominating committee. And the nominating committee has to be at least 3 active members of the congregation, and it include at least 1 ruling elder who is currently serving on the session. The pastor shall serve as ex officio and does not have a vote. So your bylaws should state how long their term of service is. So, but whenever you elect a nominating committee, include that in your minutes. And the next question, 15, did the congregation elect church officers? Session minutes should show, congregation meeting minutes rather should show that the congregation elected officers. You approved the slate that was presented by the nominating committee, or you had people from the floor that you actually voted for, whatever you did, but it needs to show that in the congregation meetings minutes. Did the session instruct, examine, ordain, and install officers? This is a question that comes up. Some people's perception is it's the pastor's responsibility to do that. It is the session's responsibility to make sure that that process takes place. Whether they authorize the pastor to do it, whether they do it themselves, whether they just send them to the trainings or whatever that are offered by the community. But ultimately, it is the session's responsibility to instruct, examine, ordain, and install officers. That all needs to be shown in your minutes, that they were examined, they were trained, when they were ordained and installed. All that information needs to be in your minutes. Item 17, is the congregation incorporated? Everybody's incorporated. They need to know what date the congregation was incorporated. Go to the, if you don't know, go to the Secretary of State's website. I think you can find that information there. Who is designated as trustees of the corporation? Is it your session, or you have another body that serves as the officers of the corporation? You need to check that there, okay? And again, I've mentioned all this on that slide, so I'm gonna skip all that. Now, insurance. Let's talk about insurance real quick. Nancy Gladden sent an email out last month that had an attachment that came from the Office of Legal and Risk Management of the Presbyterian Church USA. And in this document, it talks about insurance and the importance of insurance. Why do we have insurance? Could be a fire, your church burns down, you want to rebuild, you need insurance. You have hurricanes, you have accidents. In this day and time, we're dealing with lawsuits, such as if you have a Boy Scout troop or whatever, there's some financial errors or omissions or whatever, you need insurance. The question is, does your coverage that your church have address the things that you need to have? Are you at the right financial levels for the value of your church, its contents, whatever? You need to review your insurance annually. And that is a requirement now of the new annual report that you will be submitting. You as a church do not have to file an annual report with the Secretary of State. I'm personally involved in an LLC. I have to file a report for the LLC every year, but churches are exempt from filing a report, an annual report with the Secretary of State. I have included in your handouts, if you didn't get the email from Nancy, the document that was attached. And item 8 in that document talks about filing an annual report. In North Carolina, you don't have to do that. So disregard item 8 on that attachment, but it'll be in the email that I send you at the end of this. The last section talks about Presbyterian recommendations. Number 19 are all called and stated meetings of the session so indicated. Remember, I told you when you were doing minutes, you need to state whether it is a call meeting, your regularly scheduled meeting, or a stated meeting. If it is a, you need to show that at the top of your minutes, somewhere in there. And whoever reads your minutes will see that, hopefully. Number 20 are all minutes of session meetings signed by the clerk of session. You as the clerk are the only signature that's required on your session meeting minutes. You can have your moderator sign it, but your clerk's signature has to be there. Congregational meetings, you're the secretary for the congregation. You and the pastor or the moderator, whoever you have, has to sign congregational meeting minutes. Number 21, do minutes of the session reflect approval of the annual statistical report? Once you have pushed that button on that report, you need to present that at your next meeting and accepting that as information. But it needs to show that in your minutes that you have presented that report to your session. Has the session considered the Presbyterian missions asking? I think it's like October or November. A letter will come from the Presbytery office telling you what Presbytery does, and they will ask you for your per capita, and they will ask you for your mission given. The session needs to act on that. That should show in your minutes. 23 are called in annual meetings of the congregation so indicated. Again, just like you do for your session minutes, you show whether it's a call meeting or it's your regular annual meeting of your congregation. 24 are the minutes of the congregational meetings signed by the secretary and the moderator. Just talk about that. 25 is the name of the church on the front of your sessional records. And there were some items that were taken out of the checklist over time, but still, I think it would be good practice to keep some of these things in place. Do the minutes list all the persons in attendance? And that helps with showing that your quorum was present. It's not required, but it does help. At call meetings, and keep this in mind, please. At call meetings, was the business transacted limited to the items specifically listed in the call for the meeting? You may have a call meeting to vote on the pastor's salary, his terms of call. But while we got everybody together, Also look at a request from XYZ committee and let's do such and such and such. Can't do that. Whatever a call meeting is called for, that's all of the business you can transact at that meeting. Did the session review the installed minister's terms of call and propose congregational actions such as changes to that's as the session deems appropriate? Look at your pastor's pay every year. Your full-time pastors, look at their pay every year and see if there needs to be any adjustments. If the pastor is a commission ruling elder, a supply pastor, or temporary supply pastor, again, has the session reviewed their compensation and again reported that contract to the COM for its approval. And we've talked about statistical report there. And we talked about this one as well. Now, we covered the sheet, and as I said before, go take that sheet, go through your minutes and your other sessional record items and see what things you have. Make sure you've got all that material covered. It could be potentially helpful. I don't know, Catherine, you guys are still doing it or not. If you know that certain things on certain pages, on that right-hand column, you can put the page numbers on the sheets so that whoever's looking at your records will know where to go to. It kind of speeds up the process when you're looking for items. All right, you've got 3 sessional records reviews in the East community. One on February 25th at Windermere, March 25th at Cape Carteret, and April the 1st at Beulahville. Those are your 3 opportunities. If you cannot make any one of these 3 reviews, contact Catherine so she can make some arrangements to have one-on-one reviews done. West community, I'm sorry, I don't know how you guys are doing your process, but I'm sure if you get with Laura or whoever the person is in your community that coordinates that, and I'm sure something's been sent out probably, because normally we try to do all this stuff before Easter, if we can get them all done before Easter, or depending on when Easter is, but done in the first 3 or 4 months of the year. All right, we got 7 minutes left. If you need help with stuff, here's my contact information. Jay Bender, who has been another, I think, lifetime clerk at Pollocksville. These are we're 2 resources. We're happy to help you. Your sessional records person in your community will help you, but reach out, ask questions. And now, questions. Covered a lot in a short period of time.
Matlynn,
Yes,
this is Priscilla. Can you hear me?
you're kind of garbled, but go ahead. I'm see if I can get it.
Okay. My question is about the things that have been taken off the checklist. They're still required. It's just that they're not on the checklist anymore, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I could not hear that question.
When I mentioned some things at the end that were no longer on the checklist, but
Right.
they're still required, and she was asking were they still required.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Okay, Debbie Pollock asked the question, what books are carried to sessional review? Take your minutes, take your administrative manual, take your rolls and your registers to your review. Yes.
You've made reference several times to the length of service that the clerk is serving. If you're continuing another term, how do you stop one and show the other? What's the best way to do that? To
You
make
need to
that
have-
clear.
Session needs to have an election. That should be part of the agenda.
Okay, and that's just on the agenda and in the minutes, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
And I have a question. Does that clerk need to be an active session member?
No.
Or, perfect, thank you. We could not get a volunteer.
Okay, I understand that. It's much easier, I think, if you're not actively serving on session, just to sit there and take the minutes and do the other things rather than trying to hear and write.
Oh, I totally agree.
Okay.